Commander Zethkari stood before the massive display screen in the Valdorian Command Center. The blue light from the holographic star map painted strange shadows across his scaled face. His 4 eyes focused on the small yellow dot that marked the human colony world of New Harvest. Such a simple name for what would soon become a graveyard. "Commander, your assignment is straightforward," said High Admiral Vexthok, her voice carrying the weight of authority that came from commanding fleets across 3 galaxies. "The humans have been in space for barely 100 rotations. They know nothing of real warfare. The Zirathi swarm approaches their agricultural world, and we need detailed records of how quickly they fall." Zethkari nodded slowly. In his 40 years as a military observer, he had watched dozens of species face their first major conflict. Most lasted less than 3 days against a determined enemy. The humans would be no different. They were soft creatures who spent their time growing food and building pretty cities. War would break them quickly. "How many humans defend the world?" Zethkari asked, already knowing the answer would be pathetically small. 50,000, replied the Admiral. Mostly farmers and miners who picked up weapons when the warning came. They have basic projectile weapons and some armored vehicles, nothing that can stop the swarm. The Zirathi were different from most enemies. They did not negotiate or retreat. They consumed everything in their path, turning living matter into more of themselves. Their bioships traveled between stars, carrying millions of creatures bred for one purpose: to kill and feed. 300,000 Zirathi. Warriors would soon descend on New Harvest like a plague of hungry insects. The Galactic Council wants to understand how quickly primitive species collapse under pressure, the Admiral continued. Your recordings will help us develop better evacuation protocols for future attacks. We estimate the humans will last perhaps 72 hours before total planetary consumption. Zethkari gathered his equipment carefully. The neural recording device would capture everything he saw and felt during the battle. Advanced sensors would measure energy outputs, biological responses, and tactical decisions. His ship, the Silent Judgment, carried the most sophisticated observation technology in the galaxy. Every moment of human failure would be preserved for analysis. The journey to New Harvest took 3 days through hyperspace. During the trip, Zethkari reviewed files on human military history. They had fought each other for thousands of years, but only with primitive weapons. Their largest conflicts involved millions of soldiers using chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Crude and wasteful compared to proper military technology. The humans had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no genetic engineering programs. They relied on machines and chemistry instead of biology and physics. Their soldiers were unmodified baseline humans with slow reflexes and fragile bodies. Against the Zirathi, they would be like children fighting armored giants. When the Silent Judgment arrived at New Harvest, Zethkari was surprised by what he saw. The human world looked peaceful and green. Vast farms stretched across continents, feeding not just the local population but 17 other human colonies. Golden wheat fields moved like ocean waves in the wind. Small cities dotted the landscape, connected by roads that followed the natural curves of rivers and hills. "Beautiful world," said Lieutenant Kasmi, Zethkari's young assistant. "Shame it will be barren rock in a few days." Zethkari activated his sensors and began scanning human defensive positions. They had built walls around their cities using concrete and metal. Weapon emplacements sat on hills and rooftops. Soldiers moved in organized patterns, checking equipment and supplies. Everything looked orderly and professional, but hopelessly inadequate. The humans had perhaps 200 aircraft, most designed for cargo transport rather than combat. Their ground vehicles were simple wheeled machines with mounted guns. No hover technology, no energy weapons, no force fields. Against Zirathi bioarmor, human weapons would be like throwing stones at starships. "Commander, I am receiving communication requests from the human military," reported the ship's communication officer. "They want to establish contact with our observation vessel." This was unusual. Most species ignored observers during their final hours. Too busy preparing for death to worry about alien witnesses, Zethkari decided to respond, curious about what the humans might say. The main screen flickered, showing a human female in military uniform. She appeared young by human standards, perhaps 30 years old. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her blue eyes looked directly at Zethkari with surprising confidence. "I am General Sarah Martinez, commanding New Harvest Defense Force," she said. We know you are here to observe our battle against the Zarathi. We welcome neutral witnesses to record what happens. Zethkari found this strange. Why would a doomed commander want witnesses to her failure? I am Commander Zethkari of the Valdorian Navy. My mission is to document the upcoming engagement for Galactic Council records. Good, General Martinez replied with a slight smile. When you file your report, please include this message. New Harvest sends greetings to the galaxy. We hope our actions today will demonstrate that humanity stands ready to take its place among the civilized worlds. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkari puzzled. The human general had spoken as if victory were possible, even likely. Either she was delusional or hiding her fear behind false confidence. Both reactions were common among species facing extinction. 3 hours later, Zarathi bioships began emerging from hyperspace. Massive living vessels the size of cities, covered in thick carapaces and bristling with weapon organs. Each ship carried thousands of warriors bred for specific combat roles. Acid spitters, bone crushers, sky hunters, and burrowing demolishers. The swarm had refined killing into an art form over millions of years. Zethkari watched human responses to the Zarathi arrival. Military units moved to defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Civilian populations evacuated to underground shelters. No panic, no chaos, just calm preparation for battle. Perhaps these humans had more discipline than expected. The first Zarathi drop pods began falling toward the planet's surface like burning meteors. Each pod contained 50 warriors ready to begin the slaughter. The swarm always started with overwhelming force, landing entire armies in the first wave to break enemy morale quickly. Human anti-aircraft weapons opened fire as the pods descended. Simple chemical explosives and metal projectiles, exactly as predicted. Some pods exploded in bright flashes, spilling Zarathi bodies across the sky, but most made it through the defensive fire to crash into fields and forests around human cities. Initial combat efficiency appears normal, Zethkari recorded in his log. Human defensive fire destroys approximately 12% of incoming assault pods, standard performance for species with primitive technology. But as the first Zarathi warriors emerged from their pods and began advancing on human positions, Zethkari noticed something unexpected. The humans were not retreating to their fortified cities as military doctrine suggested. Instead, small groups of soldiers moved toward the landing sites, engaging Zarathi forces before they could organize. This was tactically wrong. Primitive forces should concentrate their strength behind walls and barriers, forcing attackers to come to them. By spreading out and attacking immediately, the humans were playing to Zarathi advantages. The aliens were faster, stronger, and had natural weapons that could cut through human armor like paper. Yet somehow these scattered human forces were not being slaughtered as expected. They moved in small, coordinated teams using terrain and cover to offset their physical disadvantages. When Zarathi charged their positions, humans would fall back, leading the aliens into prepared ambushes. Zethkari leaned forward, studying his sensor readings more carefully. Something was happening down there that did not match his expectations. The humans were not fighting like desperate farmers. They were fighting like soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. The battle for New Harvest had begun, and already Zethkari was beginning to suspect that his report might contain some surprises. Dawn came to New Harvest with the sound of war. Zethkari watched from his observation post as the first full day of battle began. The Zarathi had landed over 50,000 warriors during the night, and now they advanced on human positions in massive waves. This should have been the moment when human defenses crumbled under overwhelming force. Instead, Zethkari witnessed something that made him question his sensors. The humans were not just holding their ground, they were adapting. During the night, human engineers had worked with desperate speed to modify their farming equipment. Zethkari watched in amazement as massive irrigation pumps began spraying something that was definitely not water. The liquid caught fire as it hit Zarathi warriors, turning the aliens into screaming torches. The humans had converted their crop watering systems into flame weapons in less than 12 hours. Impossible, muttered Lieutenant Kasmi. No species adapts that quickly to combat conditions. But the humans were just getting started. When Zarathi acid spitters began melting through human armor, the defenders responded by salvaging the aliens' own acid glands. Human soldiers, many of whom had been farmers just days before, were performing battlefield surgery on dead Zarathi to harvest biological weapons. Zethkari watched a human medic named Thompson work on a fallen Zarathi warrior. The alien was twice his size with natural armor that could stop most projectiles. But Thompson had studied anatomy charts during the night, learning where Zarathi vital organs were located. He cut into the creature with surgical precision, removing acid sacs and neural clusters that could be weaponized. They are learning, Zethkari recorded in his log. Human forces are conducting biological analysis during active combat. This behavior has never been documented in previous species observations. The humans were not just copying Zarathi weapons. They were improving them. Human chemists took alien acid and mixed it with their own compounds, creating new substances that burned hotter and spread faster. Human engineers mounted Zarathi bone spears on their vehicles, giving them weapons that could penetrate alien armor. Everything the Zarathi brought to battle became a tool in human hands. Most disturbing was how quickly human children learned to help. Zethkari observed a group of teenagers working in what they called a processing station. These young humans, who should have been cowering in shelters, were instead cataloging Zarathi body parts and testing their properties. A girl who looked no older than 15 had become an expert at identifying which alien organs contained useful chemicals. "This one has the good acid," she called out, holding up a purple sack taken from a dead spitter, the kind that eats through metal but not plastic. Her friend, a boy with dirt-covered hands, nodded and added the organ to a collection bin. "My dad says they need 50 more for the new sprayer system." These children spoke about harvesting alien biology the way their grandparents might have discussed picking fruit. There was no fear, no disgust, just practical work that needed to be done. Zethkari found this more unsettling than watching adult soldiers fight. The second wave of Zarathi attacks came at midday. Flying bioforms descended from the sky like a living storm, their wings blocking out the sun. These aerial hunters had never been successfully countered by ground forces. Their speed and mobility made them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Zethkari prepared to document the moment when human defenses finally collapsed. Flying Zarathi were the death of any species that could not match their aerial capabilities. No ground-based force had ever survived a sky hunter assault, but the humans had been watching. They had studied the flying aliens during the morning attacks, noting their flight patterns and attack behaviors. Now they were ready with a response that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Human soldiers began launching themselves at the flying creatures. Zethkari stared at his screens in disbelief. Using everything from modified construction equipment to jury-rigged jetpacks, humans were turning themselves into living projectiles. They strapped explosives to their bodies and fired themselves at Zarathi flyers, detonating on impact. A farmer named Johnson had built what he called a people cannon using irrigation pipes and chemical propellants. He loaded himself into the device, lit the fuse, and shot himself 60 meters into the air to collide with a sky hunter twice his size. Both human and alien died in the explosion, but Johnson's sacrifice brought down a creature that might have killed dozens of his neighbors. "This is madness," whispered Kasmi. "They are committing suicide, but it was not madness. It was mathematics." The humans had calculated that one human life could eliminate multiple Zarathi, and they made that trade willingly. More importantly, they were learning from each sacrifice. Later suicide attacks were more precise, more effective. The humans were optimizing their own deaths. What disturbed Zethkari most was the sound. Human soldiers were laughing as they fought. Not the bitter laughter of despair, but genuine amusement. They told jokes while reloading weapons with ammunition taken from dead aliens. They sang songs while building bombs from Zarathi body parts. A soldier named Rodriguez had lost his left arm to a bone crusher's claw, but continued fighting with his remaining hand. When asked how he felt, he grinned and said, "At least now I have a good excuse for missing target practice." His fellow soldiers found this hilarious. They laughed while bandaging his wound, laughed while helping him modify his weapon for one-handed use, laughed while he went back into battle. To them, losing a limb was just another problem to solve with humor and creativity. Zethkari's psychological analysis programs could not categorize this behavior. In his experience, species facing extinction showed fear, desperation, or noble resignation. These humans showed joy. They were having fun. By evening, the impossible had happened. Human forces were not just surviving the Zarathi assault. They were pushing back. Using weapons built from alien corpses and tactics invented in the middle of battle, farmers and miners were driving back creatures that had consumed 100 worlds. The humans had turned their entire agricultural infrastructure into a war machine. Grain silos became kinetic bombardment platforms, launching massive projectiles at Zarathi formations. Harvesting machines were converted into mobile weapons platforms that could process alien warriors as efficiently as they once processed wheat. Most shocking was how the humans treated their own wounded. A medic named Chen had lost both legs to a biomine, but refused evacuation. Instead, he dragged himself across the battlefield on his hands, treating wounded soldiers while fighting off aliens with his sidearm. When offered synthetic legs, he refused, saying he was more aerodynamic without them. Sethkari watched Chen crawl through a field of burning wreckage, applying medical aid to fallen comrades while occasionally shooting Zarathi warriors who got too close. The human was bleeding, exhausted, and facing certain death, but he never stopped moving. Even when enemy acid splashed across his back, Chen just cursed and kept working. "These are not the humans described in our files," Sethkari recorded. "Either our intelligence was completely wrong, or we are witnessing a transformation. A species that was peaceful and agricultural yesterday has become something else entirely." As night fell on the first day of battle, Sethkari counted casualties. Human losses were significant but manageable. Zarathi losses were catastrophic. The aliens had expected to consume half the planet by now. Instead, they were being consumed. In the darkness, Sethkari could see human work crews moving through the battlefield. They were not just collecting their own dead and wounded. They were harvesting Zarathi biomass with industrial efficiency, processing alien corpses into raw materials for tomorrow's fight. The humans were learning. They were adapting, and most terrifying of all, they were enjoying it. Tomorrow would bring the second day of battle, and Sethkari was beginning to fear what he might witness. These humans were not the primitive farmers his superiors expected. They were something far more dangerous, and they were just getting started. The second day brought horrors that Sethkari had never seen in 40 years of military observation. The Zarathi, frustrated by their unexpected losses, deployed their aerial supremacy forces. Massive bioships descended through the atmosphere, releasing clouds of winged hunters that blackened the sky. These were not the smaller sky hunters from yesterday's attacks. These were apex predators, each the size of a human aircraft, with armor thick enough to deflect most projectiles. Their wings could generate hurricane-force winds, and their talons could slice through steel. No ground force in galactic history had ever survived an attack by massed Zarathi aerial supremacy units. Sethkari activated his full sensor array, preparing to document the final moments of human resistance. The analysis would be brief, but complete. Within hours, New Harvest would be a dead world, its surface stripped clean of all organic matter. "Commander," reported Kasmi, "the humans are doing something strange again." On the tactical display, human forces were moving into positions that made no military sense. Instead of seeking shelter or concentrating their anti-aircraft weapons, they were spreading out across open fields. Soldiers carried equipment that looked like construction gear rather than weapons. Some were building what appeared to be launching platforms. "Are they surrendering?" asked Kasmi. "Those positions offer no protection." Sethkari watched more closely. The humans were not surrendering. They were preparing something that his tactical computers could not classify. Teams of soldiers worked, with frantic efficiency, assembling devices that combined farming equipment, construction tools, and salvaged Zarathi technology. The first wave of aerial hunters descended like a living storm. Creatures the size of buildings swept across human positions, their talons reaching for easy prey. This should have been a massacre. Instead, Sethkari witnessed something that violated every principle of rational warfare. The humans launched themselves into the air, not with aircraft or energy fields, but with improvised catapults, modified construction cranes, and jury-rigged rocket packs. Human soldiers turned themselves into flying projectiles, hurling their bodies at creatures 10 times their size. They strapped explosives to their chests and rode guided missiles toward alien formations. A group of miners had converted their ore-launching equipment into human cannons. They loaded themselves into the machines like ammunition, calculating trajectories that would intercept flying Zarathi. The first miner to launch himself was a woman named Patricia Voss. She flew 90 meters through the air, collided with a sky hunter, and detonated a bomb made from Zerathi acid glands. Both human and alien died in the explosion, but Voss had proven the concept worked. More miners followed, turning themselves into guided weapons. They whooped and cheered as they flew through the air, treating their own deaths like an extreme sport. "They are insane," whispered Kasmi. "Completely insane." But madness implied. Chaos in what Zethkari observed was frighteningly organized. The humans had studied Zerathi flight patterns during the night, analyzing attack vectors and behavioral responses. Their suicide attacks were precisely coordinated to maximize damage and minimize waste. A construction foreman named Mike Torres had developed what he called aerial fishing. Using modified crane equipment, he launched cables with explosive hooks into formations of flying aliens. When the hooks caught Zerathi wings or limbs, Torres would reel in the creatures and detonate charges that killed multiple targets at once. "Got 3 with that cast," Torres shouted as alien bodies rained from the sky. "New personal record." His crew cheered and helped him reload the cable launcher. They were keeping score, competing to see who could bring down the most aliens with each attempt. Death had become a game with rules and prizes. What disturbed Zethkari most was how quickly human tactics evolved. Early suicide attacks were crude and wasteful, but within hours, the humans had developed specialized equipment and techniques that maximized the effectiveness of self-sacrifice. A teenage engineer named Lisa Park had designed smart bombs using Zerathi neural tissue. These weapons could identify target types and adjust their explosive patterns accordingly. Park tested her creations by strapping them to volunteers who rode modified motorcycles at maximum speed into enemy formations. "The version 3 model has better target recognition," Park explained to a soldier preparing for a suicide run. "It will wait until you are surrounded by at least 5 aliens before detonating. Maximum bang for your death." The soldier, a man old enough to be Park's grandfather, listened carefully and nodded approval. "Sounds good, kid. Make sure you name the crater after me." They both laughed as if this were a normal conversation about normal work. The casual acceptance of death as a tactical option was something Zethkari had never encountered in any species. But the humans were not just throwing their lives away. They were learning from every sacrifice. Combat engineers studied the wreckage of each suicide attack, gathering data that improved the next wave of weapons. Human deaths became research opportunities that advanced their military technology. Dr. Sarah Kim, a biologist who had been studying crop diseases just 3 days earlier, was now the colony's leading expert on Zerathi anatomy. She dissected alien corpses with surgical precision, identifying weak points that human weapons could exploit. "The wing joints are vulnerable here," she explained to a group of soldiers, pointing to a detailed diagram. "If you can get close enough to inject acid directly into this spot, the entire wing structure will collapse." A farmer named Jackson raised his hand. "How close do we need to get?" "Touching distance," Dr. Kim replied. "You would need to ride the creature while injecting the acid." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "I can do that. Used to ride bulls in rodeos. Can't be much different." Within an hour, Jackson was airborne, having launched himself from a catapult to land on the back of a flying Zerathi. He rode the creature like a mechanical bull, injecting acid into its wing joints while it thrashed and tried to throw him off. When the alien's wings collapsed, Jackson rode it down to the ground, whooping like he was at a county fair. He died in the crash, but the technique worked. Soon, other humans were riding Zerathi, turning aerial combat into something that resembled an extreme rodeo event. They developed scoring systems based on how long they could stay mounted before the inevitable crash. The transformation of human children was particularly unsettling. Young people who should have been protected in shelters were instead working as technical support for suicide attacks. They calculated trajectories, mixed explosives, and provided tactical analysis with the enthusiasm of children playing video games. Zethkari watched a 10-year-old boy named Danny help his older sister prepare for a catapult launch. Danny checked the explosive charges, verified the target coordinates, and gave his sister a thumbs-up signal. "Remember," Danny said seriously, "aim for the cluster formation on the left. Dad says they are bunched up too tight and will take chain damage." His sister smiled and ruffled his hair. "Thanks, little brother. See you on the other side." She climbed into the catapult like she was getting on a carnival ride. Danny pulled the release lever, launching his sister into the sky toward certain death. Both children treated this as a normal family activity. By midday, the impossible was happening again. Human forces were not just surviving the aerial assault, they were winning. Using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare, farmers and miners were destroying creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The sky began to clear as Zarathi aerial units retreated or fell burning to the ground. Human work crews moved across the battlefield with industrial efficiency, processing alien corpses into raw materials for tomorrow's weapons. They worked in teams, with children sorting body parts while adults operated makeshift processing equipment. "Liver goes in bin 3, called out a teenager named Amy. "Neural tissue goes in bin 7. Acid sacs go directly to the weapons team." The humans had established assembly lines for death, turning alien biology into tools of war. They worked with the same methodical precision their grandparents had used for harvesting crops. Except now they were harvesting enemies. Most disturbing was the music. Human soldiers sang while they worked, creating songs about their battles and victories. They composed ballads about fallen comrades who had died in spectacular ways, turning suicide attacks into legends that would inspire future generations. A group of engineers had written a song called "The Ballad of Patricia Voss," celebrating the first miner to successfully ride a missile into a Zarathi formation. They sang it while building more human cannons, treating the woman's death as inspiration rather than tragedy. As evening approached, Zethkari realized that his original mission was impossible. He could not document human defeat because the humans were not losing. Instead, he was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had weaponized its own mortality. The Zarathi had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that fear of death would break human resistance. Instead, the humans had embraced death as their most powerful weapon. They died with such creativity and enthusiasm that their own destruction became a form of warfare. The third day dawned with an eerie silence that made Zethkari's scales crawl. The constant sounds of battle had stopped, replaced by something far more disturbing: the organized efficiency of human logistics. Across the scarred landscape of New Harvest, human work crews moved with mechanical precision, processing the remains of yesterday's carnage. What Zethkari witnessed was no longer warfare. It was industrial-scale biological harvesting. The humans had established what they called processing stations throughout their territory. These facilities combined surgical precision with manufacturing efficiency, breaking down Zarathi corpses into component materials. Every organ, every biological system, every chemical compound was cataloged, analyzed, and repurposed. Dr. Sarah Kim, who 3 days ago had been studying plant diseases, now ran the largest alien autopsy facility on the planet. She worked with the calm professionalism of a factory supervisor, directing teams of volunteers who dissected Zarathi bodies with assembly line efficiency. "Acid glands go to Station 3 for weapons production," Dr. Kim called out to her crew. "Neural tissue goes to Station 7 for intelligence analysis. Bone plates go to Station 5 for armor modification." Her assistants, many of them teenagers, worked with the focused intensity of experienced butchers. They had learned Zarathi anatomy better than most galactic xenobiologists, identifying useful components with speed and accuracy that amazed Zethkari. A 15-year-old girl named Rebecca had become the colony's leading expert on Zarathi biochemistry. She could identify 17 different types of alien toxins by smell alone, and had developed new compounds by mixing human chemicals with alien biology. "This batch of neural fluid is perfect for the smart bombs," Rebecca reported, holding up a container of purple liquid. "The motor control compounds are really concentrated." She spoke about alien brain chemistry the way her grandmother might have discussed baking ingredients. There was no disgust, no fear, just practical knowledge applied to practical problems. But the humans were not content to simply harvest existing Zarathi technology. They were improving it. Zethkari watched in growing horror as human engineers modified captured Zarathi breeding chambers. These biological systems, designed to produce new warriors for the swarm, were being reprogrammed to serve human purposes. The humans were turning alien reproductive technology into weapons factories. Dr. Martinez, a veterinarian who had specialized in livestock breeding, now supervised the modification of Zarathi queen chambers. She worked with the same calm competence she had once used to help cows give birth. Except now she was forcing alien biology to produce hybrid weapons. "The growth rate is excellent," Dr. Martinez reported to General Sarah Martinez, who was no relation despite the shared name. "We can produce 50 hunter-killers per day using the modified chambers. Each one is programmed to target Zarathi pheromone signatures. The hybrid creatures that emerged from the repurposed breeding chambers were nightmares that violated every principle of natural evolution. They combined human engineering with Zarathi biology, creating weapons that existed for no purpose except killing their own parent species." Zethkari watched one of these abominations emerge from its birthing chamber. It looked like a Zarathi warrior, but its eyes showed a cold intelligence that was purely human. The creature tested its claws, flexed its wings, and immediately began hunting for Zarathi scent trails. "Beautiful work," said the human technician who had overseen its creation. "This model has improved tracking algorithms and enhanced acid production. Should be able to take out an entire Zarathi patrol by itself." The technician petted the creature like it was a beloved pet, despite the fact that it was specifically designed to commit xenocide. The casual affection humans showed for their biological weapons was more disturbing than the weapons themselves. Children played important roles in the biological warfare program. Their smaller hands could reach into delicate Zarathi organs without causing damage, making them ideal for harvesting sensitive components. They worked in teams, competing to see who could extract the most useful materials from each alien corpse. Zethkari observed a group of 10-year-olds working on a dead Zarathi queen, the largest and most dangerous type of alien warrior. The children crawled inside the creature's body cavity, harvesting organs with surgical tools designed for their small size. "I found the secondary brain," called out a boy named Tommy, his voice echoing from inside the alien corpse. "It's huge. Dr. Kim will love this." His friends cheered and helped him extract the organ, which was larger than Tommy's entire head. They handled the alien brain tissue with the same enthusiasm they might show for finding a particularly interesting rock or insect. The transformation was not limited to weapons production. Human society itself was adapting to become more efficient at warfare. Families worked together on combat projects, with parents teaching children how to kill aliens while children taught parents how to use salvaged technology. Zethkari watched the Johnson family work together in their backyard, building improvised weapons from Zarathi body parts. The father carved bone spears while the mother mixed acid compounds. Their 12-year-old daughter programmed targeting computers using alien neural tissue, and their 8-year-old son tested explosive charges. "Remember, honey," Mrs. Johnson told her daughter, "when you program the targeting system, make sure it prioritizes the big ones first. They have more useful parts when they die." The little girl nodded seriously and adjusted her programming accordingly. The family worked with the comfortable efficiency of people who had been building weapons together for years, rather than days. By afternoon, the impossible became inevitable. Human forces were not just defending New Harvest. They were preparing to attack. General Sarah Martinez announced the formation of hunting parties that would track down remaining Zarathi forces across the planet. These were not military units in any traditional sense. They were groups of farmers, miners, and children who had become experts at killing aliens for sport and profit. "We have reports of Zarathi survivors hiding in the northern mountains," the general announced over the colony's communication system. "Bounty is 50 credits per confirmed kill, double for breeding specimens we can capture alive." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Hundreds of humans volunteered for the hunting expeditions, treating the elimination of an entire species as an exciting recreational activity. They packed camping gear and biological weapons with equal care, preparing for what they called vacation hunting. Zethkari observed one hunting party as they prepared to depart. Led by a schoolteacher named Ms. Patterson, the group included several teenagers, a retired construction worker, and a professional chef who specialized in exotic cuisine. "Remember," Ms. Patterson told her students, This is both a learning experience and a community service. We need to catalog any new Zerathi subspecies we encounter, and we need to eliminate them before they can reproduce. Her students nodded eagerly, checking their equipment with the enthusiasm of children going on a field trip. They carried biological weapons, scientific instruments, and specimen collection gear. To them, hunting alien survivors was an educational adventure. The chef, a man named Gordon, was particularly excited about the opportunity to experiment with Zerathi cuisine. He had been developing recipes using alien biology, treating the invaders as an exotic food source rather than a mortal threat. The acid glands make excellent seasoning when properly neutralized, Gordon explained to his hunting companions, and the muscle tissue has a texture similar to lobster, but with a more complex flavor profile. The humans were not just killing their enemies, they were eating them. As evening approached, Zethkari received reports from his sensors that made him question his own sanity. The Zerathi swarm, which had arrived with over 300,000 warriors, was down to fewer than 10,000 survivors. Most were hiding in remote locations, trying to avoid the human hunting parties that tracked them with remorseless efficiency. The humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not just defeated the Zerathi, they had domesticated them. In hidden facilities across New Harvest, humans kept captured Zerathi alive for research purposes. These aliens, bred for conquest and consumption, were reduced to laboratory animals in human experiments. Scientists studied their behavior, tested new weapons on their bodies, and used them as breeding stock for hybrid weapons. Dr. Kim showed Zethkari her prize specimen, a Zerathi queen that had been captured alive during the first day of fighting. The massive creature was held in a specially constructed chamber, its limbs restrained and its mind chemically suppressed. "She is incredibly useful," Dr. Kim explained with obvious pride. "We can harvest eggs for hybrid production, study her neural responses to different stimuli, and test new toxins on her immune system. She is like a living laboratory." The queen, once a creature capable of commanding thousands of warriors, was now reduced to a biological machine that produced raw materials for human weapons. Her eyes showed awareness of her situation, but the chemical restraints prevented any resistance. Zethkari realized with growing horror that he was witnessing the birth of something that had never existed in the galaxy before. A species that treated war as both science and entertainment. The fourth day brought no battle. The war was over. What remained was something far more disturbing than any conflict Zethkari had ever witnessed. The systematic processing of victory by a species that had discovered its true nature. In the smoking ruins of what had once been Zerathi landing sites, human families worked together with the casual efficiency of people cleaning up after a successful harvest festival. Children played games among the alien corpses while adults sorted through biological materials with the same care their ancestors had used for canning vegetables. Zethkari conducted his mandatory post-battle interviews, expecting to find the psychological trauma that always followed major combat. Species that survived their first contact with the Zerathi typically showed signs of collective shock, survivor guilt, and cultural disruption that lasted for generations. Instead, he found humans who were already planning improvements for next time. General Sarah Martinez met him in her temporary command center, a converted farm building that still smelled of grain and machinery oil. Her uniform was clean, her manner professional, and her eyes showed no sign of the strain that should have followed 4 days of desperate combat. "Commander Zethkari," she said with a genuine smile, "I hope our performance met your expectations for documentation purposes." Zethkari struggled to find appropriate words. "Your casualties were significant. How do your people cope with such losses?" The general looked puzzled by the question. "Losses? Commander, we prefer to think of them as investments. Every person who died taught us something valuable about fighting the Zerathi. Their deaths made the rest of us more effective." She spoke about human sacrifice the way a businessman might discuss research and development costs. There was no grief, no regret, just practical analysis of resource allocation. To her, the death of her own soldiers was a form of profitable education. "We have learned so much," the general continued enthusiastically. "Dr. Kim's biological research team has identified 47 distinct ways to weaponize Zerathi anatomy. Our engineering crews have developed new manufacturing techniques using alien breeding chambers, and our children have proven remarkably adaptable to combat support roles. Zethkari realized that the humans were not recovering from their first major war. They were celebrating it. He interviewed civilians next, expecting to find people traumatized by their exposure to violence. Instead, he found community members who spoke about the battle with the enthusiasm of sports fans discussing their favorite team's victory. Mrs. Peterson, a schoolteacher whose class had helped process alien corpses, was particularly excited about the educational opportunities the war had provided. The children learned so much about biology, chemistry, and engineering, she explained proudly. They got hands-on experience with concepts that would normally take years to master in a classroom setting. Many of them are already designing improvements to our weapon systems. She showed Zethkari drawings made by her students. Instead of typical childhood art featuring flowers and animals, these pictures depicted detailed diagrams of Zerathi anatomy, chemical formulas for biological weapons, and engineering schematics for human-alien hybrid creatures. Little Tommy drew this design for a new type of acid bomb, Mrs. Peterson said, pointing to a crayon drawing that showed remarkable technical sophistication. His understanding of chemical reactions is really impressive for a 9-year-old. The child had drawn pictures of alien death with the same care and attention most children devoted to birthday parties or family pets. More disturbing, his technical understanding was genuinely advanced. The chemical formulas in his drawings were mathematically sound. Zethkari interviewed Dr. Sarah Kim next, hoping to find some sign of normal psychological response to the horrors of biological warfare. Instead, he found a scientist who was more excited about her work than she had ever been in her previous career, studying crop diseases. "This has been the most rewarding research experience of my life," Dr. Kim said with obvious sincerity. "The complexity of Zerathi biology is fascinating. Their regenerative systems, their chemical production capabilities, their neural networking protocols. It is all so elegant and efficient." She spoke about alien anatomy with the passionate enthusiasm of someone discussing their greatest hobby. Her laboratory was filled with specimens, research notes, and experimental equipment that represented months of work, compressed into 4 days of frantic discovery. "We have made breakthrough discoveries in biotechnology, chemical engineering, and neural programming," Dr. Kim continued. "The applications for civilian use will revolutionize our agricultural and manufacturing systems. This war has advanced our science by decades." To her, the Zerathi invasion had been an unexpected gift of research opportunities, rather than a threat to human survival. She had turned genocide into scientific advancement, treating mass death as data collection. Most disturbing were his interviews with the children. Zethkari had observed many species' young people, and they typically showed clear signs of trauma after exposure to warfare. Human children showed signs of excitement and anticipation. 12-year-old Amy Patterson had worked in the biological processing stations throughout the conflict. When asked about her experience, she responded with the confidence of someone describing their favorite hobby. "It was amazing," Amy said with genuine enthusiasm. "I learned so much about alien biology and weapons design. My acid extraction technique improved by 30% over the 4 days. I can't wait for the next invasion so I can test my new ideas." She spoke about participating in industrial-scale killing, with the same tone most children used to discuss summer camp activities. There was no fear, no disgust, no psychological damage. Instead, there was pride in technical achievement and excitement about future opportunities. 8-year-old Danny Kim had helped his sister prepare for her suicide attack on the second day. When asked how he felt about her death, his response chilled Zethkari to his core. "I was proud of her," Danny said matter-of-factly. "She got really good trajectory and took out 6 aliens with 1 bomb. That's better than anyone else did that day. I hope I can do as good when I'm old enough." The child spoke about his sister's death as a performance metric rather than a personal loss. To him, suicide bombing was a skill to master, rather than a tragedy to mourn. He was planning his own death as a future achievement goal. Zethkari realized that he was not witnessing post-traumatic stress. He was witnessing post-traumatic growth of a type that violated every psychological principle known to galactic science. As evening approached, he attended what the humans called a victory celebration. This community gathering was held in the town square, decorated with banners made from Zarathi hide and illuminated by torches fueled with alien biological oils. The humans had prepared food using Zarathi meat, served drinks flavored with alien biochemistry, and created entertainment based on recreating their favorite moments from the battle. Children performed theatrical reenactments of suicide attacks while adults sang songs about processing alien corpses. A local chef named Gordon had prepared what he called a Zarathi feast featuring 17 different dishes made from alien biology. The crowd sampled these exotic foods with adventurous enthusiasm, treating their former enemies as an interesting addition to local cuisine. "The acid gland reduction has a lovely citrus tang," commented one diner. "And the neural tissue soufflé is surprisingly light and flavorful." They were eating their enemies not from desperation or primitive custom, but from culinary curiosity. The aliens that had come to consume New Harvest were instead being consumed by New Harvest, transformed into dinner party conversation pieces. During the celebration, General Martinez announced the formation of the New Harvest Volunteer Defense Force, a permanent military organization that would be ready for future conflicts. Hundreds of civilians immediately volunteered, treating military service as an exciting hobby rather than a dangerous obligation. "We have submitted an application to join the Galactic Council Defense Forces," the general announced to enthusiastic applause. "We believe our experience with Zarathi combat techniques will be valuable for protecting other worlds." The crowd cheered at the prospect of traveling to other planets to fight different types of aliens. They treated interplanetary warfare as an exciting career opportunity, rather than a necessary evil. They wanted to export their approach to combat across the galaxy. As the celebration continued into the night, Zethkari retreated to his ship to compile his final report. But how could he document what he had witnessed? How could he explain to the Galactic Council that they had not observed a species' first contact with major warfare, but rather a species' discovery of its true nature? The humans had not been broken by war. They had been completed by it. Everything about human civilization that had seemed soft and peaceful, their agriculture, their family structures, their education systems, their community cooperation, had proven to be perfect preparation for industrial-scale killing. They farmed aliens the way they farmed crops. They raised weapons the way they raised children. They processed death the way they processed food. Zethkari stared at his blank report screen for hours, unable to find words that would convey the truth without causing galaxy-wide panic. The humans were not just dangerous.